Human, hurry up and do it. The alien princess is losing patience. It was a quiet evening, just like any other. The hum of the city outside blended into the background as Jack sat at his desk, eyes glued to the screen in front of him. His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing away at the code for his latest project. It had been a long day, and even though he was exhausted, Jack knew he had to finish this before morning. But as the hours passed and the clock ticked away, something strange happened. The lights in his apartment flickered once, then twice before finally going out completely. Jack let out a frustrated sigh and pushed back from his desk. Great, he muttered, standing up and feeling his way toward the light switch. But just as his hand reached out, the entire building seemed to shake. He braced himself against the wall as the tremor passed. A moment later, the emergency lights came on, casting the apartment in an eerie dim glow. It was enough to see, but not enough to comfort him. Jack grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and made his way toward the exit. The hallway outside was dark, but the emergency lights flickered faintly ahead. Jack was about to step into the elevator when a strange sound caught his attention. It was a soft hum, like an engine running at full power. Jack hesitated for a moment, his curiosity piqued. The hum seemed to be coming from down the hall. He stepped forward, cautiously following the sound. He rounded a corner, and there, standing at the end of the hallway, was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, and dressed in strange, shimmering armor that seemed to glow in the dim light. At first, Jack thought it might be some kind of elaborate costume, but as he drew closer, he realized it was something much more than that. Standing before him was an alien. No, not just any alien, but a woman, her skin smooth and pale like marble, her eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. She looked directly at him, her expression a mix of frustration and urgency. You, she said, her voice sharp and commanding. Human, you must hurry. Pfizer, the situation is critical. Her words were strange, her accent unfamiliar, but Jack could understand every word as if they were meant just for him. Jack stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Was this some kind of dream? A joke? He blinked several times, but when he opened his eyes, she was still standing there. The alien princess, as Jack soon learned, had crash landed near Earth and needed his help. Her ship was damaged and the situation was dire. But what struck Jack the most was how desperate she seemed. There was no time for hesitation. You need to come with me, she said, her voice almost impatient now. We don't have much time. I cannot do this alone. Jack's mind raced. This couldn't be real, but everything about her presence, the strange energy she gave off, the urgency in her tone, told him this was no dream. Who are you? Jack asked, his voice shaking. I am Princess Elara, she said, as if the name itself would explain everything. I need your help, human. You are my only hope. Jack blinked, still trying to process her words. The idea of helping an alien princess was completely out of the question, wasn't it? But as he looked at her, standing there in the hallway with her glowing eyes and pleading expression, something told him he had no choice but to follow her. Okay, Jack said, still unsure of what was happening. I'll help you. But what exactly do you need? I need to fix my ship, Princess Elara replied, her impatience evident. There is a mineral on this planet I need. It is the only thing that can power my ship's engine. Jack felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. You are asking me to help you find a mineral? He had no idea where to even begin. Yes, Alara replied, but there is no time to waste. Every second counts. You must hurry. The longer we wait, the more likely it is that my enemies will catch up to us. Her words were clear and the urgency in her tone was enough to convince Jack that she wasn't lying. He didn't know how he could help, but one thing was for sure: he wasn't going to let this alien princess down. He had to find a way. Together they set off down the hallway, Jack still in shock but determined to help. As they made their way through the dark building, Elara's impatience grew. She kept glancing at her wristband, which Jack now saw was some kind of high tech device that seemed to monitor her surroundings. Her frustration was palpable. Human, hurry up, she snapped, glancing at him. Time is of the essence. Every moment we waste brings me closer to being captured, and I will not let that happen. Jack felt his heart race. The way she spoke to him was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It wasn't that she was rude, but her commands carried a weight that Jack couldn't ignore. He wasn't sure if it was her status as royalty or her alien nature, but there was no denying that he was drawn to her urgency. They reached the main entrance, and Elara paused, looking around. Jack was ready to ask her more questions, but she cut him off. We must leave quickly, she said, her voice now quiet but filled with authority. Follow me. The noise of the city felt distant now, as if Jack had entered a different world entirely. As they walked, Jack couldn't help but notice how much attention Elara drew. People who passed by didn't seem to notice her strange appearance, but Jack couldn't help but feel as if he was walking beside something or someone extraordinary. It wasn't long before they reached a secluded part of the city, and Elara motioned for Jack to follow her into a small alley. There, hidden in the shadows, was a small, sleek ship unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It looked as though it had been designed for speed and stealth. The ship's hull was marked with strange symbols, and Jack could see that it had been badly damaged. Elara moved fistfully, her hands working with the ship's control panel, pressing buttons and flipping switches. Jack was still standing at the entrance, unsure of what to do. Come, human, Elara called. Help me fix this. The mineral I need is within reach. We don't have time to waste. Jack hesitated but knew there was no turning back. He stepped inside the ship and Elara began to explain what needed to be done. But as she did, Jack realized that he was in way over his head. He wasn't a scientist or an engineer. He was just a guy trying to make ends meet, doing tech work in a small office. Yet, somehow, he had become a part of something far bigger than himself. As the princess worked, Jack stood by watching her movements. She was quick and efficient, yet there was something about her, something that made him feel both uncomfortable and awestruck at the same time. She was a princess, yes, but more than that, she was someone who carried the weight of a world on her shoulders. Despite their differences, Jack knew one thing for sure: this was no ordinary night. And helping this alien princess was going to change his life in ways he couldn't even imagine. The minutes seemed to drag on, turning into hours as Jack and Elara worked side by side in the cramped ship's cockpit. He had no idea how to fix the ship, but Elara was determined to get it up and running. She moved quickly, pressing buttons, pulling lever, and murmuring to herself in a language Jack couldn't understand. The hum of the ship's broken engines echoed in the background, adding a sense of urgency to the already tense atmosphere. Human, Elara said, her voice strained but still filled with authority. We are running out of time. The enemies will find us if we don't act fast. Do you understand? Jack nodded, though he was still unsure about everything. He'd never imagined his night would turn into something so out of his depth. One minute he was a programmer stuck in his apartment, and the next he was helping an alien princess fix her ship in the middle of a dark alley. He had no idea how any of this was going to turn out, but something about Elara's words made him want to help. made him want to do whatever he could to make sure she succeeded. I understand, Jack said, though he wasn't sure what he was agreeing to. He glanced at the broken ship's engine again, feeling useless. But how can I help? I don't know anything about fixing spaceships. Ilara glanced at him, her eyes glowing faintly. You have more to offer than you think. The mineral I need is near here, but you will need to find it. We don't have time to waste. Jack felt the pressure of her words, the weight of the tasks she had just given him. He had no idea where to even start looking for a rare mineral, but he knew one thing: he couldn't fail. He had to find a way to help Elara, even if it meant stepping into unknown territory. All right, Jack said, taking a deep breath. I'll go, but you have to promise me something. Elara raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. What? You have to teach me something about how this ship works while I'm gone, Jack said with a small grin. Maybe that way I won't feel like I am completely out of my depth. For a moment, Elara didn't respond. She simply stared at Jack as if trying to assess whether he was serious or not. Then, with a slight nod, she replied, Very well, but there is no time for lessons. Find the mineral. I will start the repairs. We must leave before the warlord catches up to us. Jack nodded, though he still had many questions. Who was this warlord? Why was Elara so important? What would happen if they didn't succeed? But instead of asking, he simply turned and left the ship, knowing that he had to focus on the task at hand. The city outside the alley felt different now, as though it had become a backdrop to something much larger than anything Jack could have imagined. The streets were quieter than usual, and the usual noises of traffic and chatter seemed to have faded into the background. He moved quickly, trying to think of where he might find the rare mineral Elara had mentioned. His mind raced, trying to remember anything from his high school geology class, but there was nothing that stood out. He had no idea what kind of mineral Elara needed, only that it was essential for the repair of her ship. Jack found himself walking through the streets with a sense of purpose, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. He had no idea where to begin. The city was a maze full of dark alleys and unfamiliar storefronts. Jack had no experience with minerals or anything like that. He was just a regular guy who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. As he walked, his thoughts drifted to Elara. What was she really like? She was clearly powerful, commanding, and used to getting things done. Yet there was something about her that made Jack feel a sense of respect, almost as if she were more than just an alien princess. There was something deeply human about her, despite her royal status. He stopped walking for a moment, looking around the city streets. There was a small, unassuming shop tucked between two larger buildings. The sign above the door read Old Earth Relics. Jack's curiosity got the better of him, and he stepped inside, hoping to find something that might help him with his search. Inside, the shop was dimly lit, with shelves lined with all sorts of objects, old books, strange trinkets, and artifacts that seemed to have little in common. An elderly man stood behind the counter, his glasses poised on the end of his nose. He looked up as Jack entered. Can I help you? The man asked, his voice raspy but kind. I'm looking for a rare mineral, Jack said, feeling somewhat embarrassed. Do you have anything like that? The man eyed Jack carefully, as if sizing him up. Rare minerals, you say? What kind are you looking for? I'm not sure, Jack admitted. But it needs to be powerful. Something that could power a spaceship. The sand peaked beaking. The old man smiled knowingly. Ah, you are looking for something specific, aren't you? I might have just what you need. Follow me. Rock, rock, Rock followed the man to the back of the shop, where a small glass case sat on a dusty shelf. The man opened the case, and pointed to a small glowing rock. It shimmered in the dim light, almost as if it were alive. This, the man said, is exactly what you are looking for. It's called flare stone, extremely rare, found only in the deepest mines. It has energy unlike anything you've seen. Jack was stunned. He couldn't believe it. This was it. This was the mineral Elara needed. How much is it? Jack asked, his heart racing with excitement. The old man looked at Jack carefully, as if weighing his options. I can't just sell it to anyone. This is a rare piece. It's not for just any person who walks in off the street. I really need it, Jack said, his voice pleading. An alien princess is depending on me. The old man's eyes softened as he looked at Jack. I can see you're desperate, but you'll have to earn it. Bring me something valuable in return. Only then will I part with it. He didn't have anything of value, at least nothing that could be traded for something so rare. But he wasn't about to give up. Anything? Jack asked. The man nodded. Warm. Anything? Jack thought for a moment, then had an idea. I'll be back, he said, leaving the shop in a hurry. As he stepped back into the streets, Jack's mind was racing. He had to think fast. He had to find something valuable to trade for the flare stone. It wasn't until he found himself back at the ship standing next to Elara that he realized just how much this mission meant to him. I found a mineral, Jack said, his voice filled with determination. But I need to make a trade. I need your help. Elara looked at him, her eyes glowing with curiosity. What do you need? I need something valuable, Jack said. Something that will prove to the shopkeeper I am serious. Elara nodded. I can provide that, she said, her voice steady. But you must hurry. The warlord is coming. We don't have much time. Jack didn't need any more motivation. He turned back to the shop, determined to finish what he had started. Jack's heart raced as he sprinted back to the small, dimly lit shop. The weight of his decision pressed down on him like a heavy stone. The old man had made it clear he wouldn't part with the flare stone unless Jack could offer something valuable in return. Jack had no idea what he could possibly trade that would be worth it, but he knew he couldn't come back empty-handed. Elara was depending on him, and failure wasn't an option. The city felt different now, almost unreal, as though Jack had stepped into a world that existed outside of time and reason. The streets were quiet, the usual bustle replaced by an eerie silence that made every footstep seem too loud. His thoughts were scattered, filled with the strange new world he had been thrust into, an alien princess, a crashed ship, and a warlord who could tear everything apart. The stakes had never been higher. When he reached the shop, the door creaked as he pushed it open. The old man was still behind the counter, and when he saw Jack's determined expression, he raised an eyebrow. I found something of value, Jack said, his voice steady despite the nerves building up inside him. The man nodded, his wrinkled face showing no sign of surprise. You're serious then? Jack didn't have time to waste with words. He pulled out a small antique watch from his pocket. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The watch had been his grandfather's, a family heirloom passed down for generations. It wasn't worth much on the market, but to Jack it meant everything. It was the one thing he could offer in exchange for the mineral. I'm offering this, Jack said, placing the watch on the counter between them. It's all I have. Please, I need that flare stone. The old man's eyes scanned the watch, his fingers gently touching the glass, inspecting the delicate timepiece. For a long moment the shop was silent. Jack held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, the old man nodded. It's yours, he said, pushing the flare stone toward Jack. A fair trade. Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed the glowing mineral and placed it carefully into his pocket. The weight of it seemed much lighter than the pressure on his shoulders. Thank you, Jack said, his voice filled with gratitude. The old man gave him a small smile, nodding as Jack turned and hurried out of the shop. His mind was racing now, but there was no time to think about what had just happened. We needed to get back to Alara. The warlord was coming, and if they didn't fix the ship soon, they would be caught. As Jack made his way back through the quiet streets, he couldn't help but wonder about the princess. Who was she really? Why was she so desperate? There was something about her that seemed familiar, yet completely foreign. Despite everything she had been through, she never once seemed afraid. She was always in control, always moving forward, always pushing him to do more. When Jack reached the ship, Elara was already waiting for him. She stood at the entrance, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon, watching for any sign of danger. As soon as she saw him, her expression softened, though there was still an edge of urgency in her demeanor. You found it? She asked, her voice steady but with a hint of relief. Jack pulled the flare stone from his pocket and handed it to her. I did. We have what we need. Elara nodded, taking the mineral from him and moving swiftly toward the ship's control panel. Her fingers flew over the controls, and the hum of the engines grew louder as she worked. The ship had been damaged beyond what Jack could understand, but Elara seemed to know exactly what to do. Every move was calculated, precise. Human, you've done well, Elara said, her voice almost softer than before. I am grateful for your help. Jack stood back, watching her work. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. A part of him had always wanted to be more than just a tech guy sitting behind a desk. Helping Alara felt like something more, something important, but there was no time to bask in the moment. They still had one final obstacle to face. The warlord. Alara's expression darkened as she worked. We don't have long, she said, her tone firm once again. The warlord is closing in. If we don't leave now, it will be too late. Jack didn't need any more explanation. He knew what had to be done. He glanced around at the ship, at the makeshift preppers they had made, and felt a surge of determination. They had come this far. He wouldn't let them fail now. Are we ready? Jack asked, his voice low but resolute. Elara paused for a moment, her eyes meeting his. Yes, but you must trust me, human. We can't fight this battle the way you are used to. This is not something that can be solved with strength alone. The warlord is ruthless. We need to outsmart him, not confront him directly. Jack nodded, understanding. He had no illusions about his own ability to fight an alien warlord. He wasn't a soldier, he was just a guy who had found himself in the middle of a situation far beyond anything he had ever imagined. As Elara powered up the ship, Jack felt a sudden rush of fear. The idea of facing down a warlord who could destroy everything they had worked for was terrifying. But he knew there was no turning back now. The ship's engines roared to life, and the small vessel lifted off the ground with a smooth, powerful motion. Jack gripped the sides of his seat as they shot into the sky, the city below shrinking into the distance. Alara sat at the controls, her focus unwavering. We need to get to the edge of Earth's atmosphere, she said. Warm. Once we're out of range, we can evade the warlord. Jake didn't ask any more questions. He just watched as Elara piloted the ship with incredible skill, weaving through the clouds and heading toward the stars. Warp. The world they had just left behind seemed so small now, so insignificant compared to what lay ahead. As the ship ascended higher and higher, Jack felt a strange sense of peace. Despite the chaos and uncertainty, he knew he was doing something important. He was helping Elara, yes, but in some way he was also helping himself. He had stepped out of his comfortable life and into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined, and that thought gave him the strength to face whatever came next. Soon the warlord ships appeared on the radar, closing in quickly. Elara's hands flew over the controls, her face set in a determined expression. Get ready, she said, her voice steady. This is where it gets difficult. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he held on tight. They were in this together now. Whatever happened next, they would face it side by side. And for the first time in his life, Jack didn't feel afraid. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The warlord ships were closing in fast, but Elara wasn't giving up. She had a plan and she was ready to carry it out. Jack didn't need to know all the details. He trusted her, and that was all that mattered. As stars stretched out before them, Jake felt a new sense of purpose. They weren't just running away from danger. They were heading towards something bigger, something that could change everything. And no matter what happened next, Jack knew he had made the right choice. He had stepped into the unknown, and he was ready to face whatever came next with Elara by his side.